What if a single act of kindness could change your entire life? That's exactly what happened to Emily, a struggling waitress who never imagined that one ordinary evening would turn into a miracle. And the man behind it? None other than Keanu Reeves. But she didn't know that yet. The clock struck 10:30 p.m. and the tiny roadside diner in Los Angeles was nearly empty. Emily, a 24-year-old waitress, wiped down the counter, exhaustion weighing heavily on her shoulders. She had been on her feet since morning, her shift stretching longer than usual. But she couldn't complain. Every extra tip mattered. Her mother was battling a serious illness and medical bills kept piling up. Emily barely made enough to pay rent, let alone cover hospital expenses. Yet, despite the struggle, she always greeted customers with a warm smile. That night, just as she thought about heading home, the diner door creaked open. A man, dressed in a simple black hoodie and jeans, walked in. He didn't look like anyone special. Just another tired customer looking for a late-night meal. Emily quickly straightened up and walked over. "Good evening. What can I get for you?" she asked, her voice as cheerful as she could make it. The man looked up, his eyes kind yet weary. "Just a cup of coffee and whatever you recommend," he said softly. Something about him seemed familiar, but Emily couldn't place it. She smiled, nodding. "You got it." As she prepared his meal, she noticed how he quietly observed the place, as if lost in thought. Unlike most late-night customers, he wasn't scrolling through his phone or rushing through his order. He simply watched the neon lights flickering outside, the hum of the coffee machine, the way she moved around. And then, just as she set his plate down, he said something that caught her completely off guard. "You look tired, but you still smile. That's rare." Emily blinked, surprised. "Oh, well, it's part of the job," she said with a small chuckle. "People come here to feel comfortable. It wouldn't be fair to make them feel unwelcome." The man nodded, stirring his coffee slowly. There was something in his expression, as if he understood struggle, as if he had seen it before. Emily had no idea that this seemingly ordinary customer was about to change her life forever. The man took a sip of his coffee, his eyes still studying Emily with quiet curiosity. Unlike most customers who came and went without much thought, he seemed genuinely interested in her. "You've been working here long?" he asked casually. Emily nodded, leaning slightly against the counter. "Yeah, about 3 years now. It's not the dream job, but it pays the bills." "Well, most of them," she added with a tired smile. The man set his coffee cup down gently. "And what is the dream?" Emily hesitated. It had been a long time since anyone asked her that. Most people only saw her as a waitress, not as someone with hopes beyond this tiny diner. She sighed, glancing at the old radio playing soft music in the background. "I wanted to be a writer," she admitted. "Stories have always been my escape, my way of making sense of things. But life doesn't always go the way we plan, right?" The man nodded slowly, as if he understood exactly what she meant. "Life has a way of testing us," he said, "but sometimes the hardest roads lead to the most unexpected destinations." His words lingered in the air. There was something different about him, something familiar. But before Emily could place it, her manager, a grumpy middle-aged man named Frank, called out from the back, "Emily, stop chatting and clean up table 4. Emily quickly straightened up. "Sorry, duty calls," she said apologetically. The man simply smiled. "No worries, take your time." As she walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something special about this stranger. He wasn't just another late-night customer, and soon she would find out just how extraordinary he really was. Emily hurried to clean up table 4, wiping away crumbs and stacking plates while trying to ignore Frank's usual grumbling. But her thoughts kept drifting back to the quiet man at the counter. There was something different about him. His words, his presence. It wasn't just small talk. It felt like he truly saw her. When she finally returned to the counter, she found the man finishing his coffee, staring out the window at the empty street. "Thanks for the meal," he said with a small smile as he reached into his pocket. Emily waved it off. "No problem. You sure you don't need anything else?" He shook his head. "Just keep doing what you're doing. The world needs more people like you." She laughed softly. "Yeah, well, The world doesn't exactly pay the bills." The man's smile deepened as he placed a few bills on the counter. "Maybe tonight it will." With that, he stood up, pulled his hood over his head, and walked toward the door. "Have a good night," he said before stepping outside. Emily sighed and grabbed the bill to ring up the payment, and then her hands started shaking. There wasn't just a tip. There was a stack of crisp $100 bills. Her breath caught in her throat. $10,000 right there under his coffee cup, and a small note scribbled on a napkin. "For your kindness and hard work. Never stop believing in yourself." Her heart pounded. She looked up, eyes darting to the window, but he was gone. She spun around in shock, her voice barely above a whisper. Who was he?" A co-worker nearby gasped as they peeked over her shoulder. Then their eyes widened in realization. "Emily, don't you recognize him?" Emily blinked, still trying to process what just happened. And then it hit her like a bolt of lightning. That wasn't just any stranger. That was Keanu Reeves. Emily's breath hitched as she stared at the stack of cash, her mind racing. Keanu Reeves. No, it couldn't be. Could it? Her co-worker, Mia, leaned in, still in shock. "Emily, that was Keanu Reeves," she whispered loudly. "How did you not recognize him?" Emily's hands trembled as she picked up the napkin with his note. I don't know. He just seemed so normal." Mia let out a soft laugh. "Yeah, that's kind of his thing. No bodyguards, no attitude, just a regular guy." She nudged Emily. "And apparently a really generous one." Frank, the diner manager, walked over, his eyes narrowing. "What's going on here?" he asked, clearly annoyed. Emily turned to him, her voice unsteady. "That customer. He left this." She gestured to the money on the counter. Frank's eyes widened, but instead of looking impressed, he frowned. "Are you kidding me? This is a prank. No one leaves that kind of money just like that." He snatched a bill from the stack and held it up to the light. Mia crossed her arms. "Frank, come on. You think Emily's making this up?" Frank scoffed. "I don't know what's going on, but if this is real, you better not get your hopes up. Money like this doesn't just fall into your lap." Emily felt a wave of doubt creep in. Was this really happening? Was this money actually hers? Then, as if the universe wanted to prove Frank wrong, the diner's front door swung open again. A man in a suit stepped inside, holding an envelope. He scanned the room before his eyes landed on Emily. Walking over, he gave her a polite nod. "Are you Emily?" She swallowed hard. Yes?" The man handed her the envelope. "Mr. Reeves asked me to make sure you received this. He didn't want any attention, but he wanted you to know he believes in you." Emily's heart pounded as she carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter and a receipt. Her eyes scanned the paper. Her mother's outstanding hospital bills had been paid in full. Her knees nearly buckled. She covered her mouth, tears welling up in her eyes. This wasn't just a generous tip. Keanu Reeves had just saved her mother's life. Mia gasped. "Oh my God. Emily." Frank, for once, was speechless. Emily clutched the letter to her chest, overwhelmed with emotions. Why would he do this for her? And then she remembered his words from earlier that night. Life has a way of testing us, but sometimes the hardest roads lead to the most unexpected destinations. Emily had no idea that her life was about to change forever. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she held the letter in her trembling hands. The reality of what had just happened hit her all at once. Her mother's medical bills were gone. A weight she had carried for years had been lifted in an instant by a man she barely knew. Mia wiped her own eyes, shaking her head in disbelief. "Emily, do you understand what this means? You don't have to struggle anymore. Your mom is going to get the treatment she needs." Emily nodded, still unable to find her voice. Why me? Why would Keanu Reeves do this for a complete stranger? Frank, who had been skeptical just moments ago, now looked stunned. He let out a deep sigh and muttered, "Well, guess I was wrong." He scratched the back of his head. "Look, Emily, I know I've been hard on you, but if you need some time off to take care of your mom, just say the word." Emily exhaled shakily, processing everything. Her mother's treatments were covered. She didn't have to take extra shifts just to scrape by. For the first time in years, she had options. Mia squeezed her hand. So, what now? You could take a break. Maybe even start writing again? Writing. The dream she had buried long ago. The thing that made her feel alive before life got in the way. She looked down at the napkin, reading Keanu's words again. For your kindness and hard work. Never stop believing in yourself. Maybe this was more than just an act of kindness. Maybe this was a sign. Emily wiped her tears and took a deep breath. I think it's time I start living for more than just survival. Mia grinned. Does that mean what I think it means? Emily nodded, her decision made. I'm going to chase my dream. I'm going to be a writer. For the first time in years, she wasn't just surviving. She was ready to live. And it was all because one man with a quiet act of kindness had believed in her when she had almost stopped believing in herself. That night, Emily sat at her tiny kitchen table, staring at a blank page in her notebook. Her heart was still racing from everything that had happened at the diner. The money, the letter, the realization that Keanu Reeves had changed her life in ways she never expected. She glanced at her mother, who was peacefully asleep in the next room. For the first time in years, Emily felt a sense of relief. The crushing burden of medical bills was gone, and with it, the constant fear of losing the one person who mattered most to her. With a deep breath, she picked up her pen and began to write. Dear Mr. Reeves, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need to say thank you. Not just for the money, not just for saving my mother's life, but for something far greater. You reminded me that kindness still exists in the world, that no matter how hard life gets, there are people who care. You saw me when I felt invisible. You believed in me when I had almost stopped believing in myself. For years I put my dreams aside, convinced they didn't matter. But tonight, I realized something. I want to write again. I want to tell stories, just like I always dreamed of. And it's all because of you. I don't know if we'll ever meet again, but I promise you this. One day, when my book is published, the first copy will have your name on it. With all my heart, Emily. She let out a shaky breath as she finished the letter, a single tear landing on the page. She didn't know if Keanu Reeves would ever see it, but writing it made her realize this wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning. The next morning, she slipped the letter into an envelope and sent it to the address on the letter Keanu's assistant had given her. She didn't expect a reply, but fate had one more surprise waiting for her. A week had passed since Emily sent the letter. She had gone back to work at the diner, but everything felt different now. There was a lightness in her step, a renewed sense of purpose. She spent her nights writing, pouring her heart into the stories she had long abandoned. For the first time in years, she wasn't just waiting for life to get better. She was creating a future she believed in. Then, one evening, as she was closing up the diner, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. Hello? She answered, confused. A warm, familiar voice came through the line. Emily, it's Keanu. Her heart nearly stopped. Keanu Reeves, calling her. I got your letter, he continued, and I just wanted to say, I believe in you, Emily. Keep writing. The world needs your stories. Emily clutched the phone, tears filling her eyes. She had written the letter without expecting a response, but now, hearing his words, she felt a fire ignite inside her. Thank you, she whispered. You have no idea what this means to me. Keanu chuckled softly. I think I do. And when your book is published, I'll be the first in line to buy it. The call ended, but Emily sat there staring at her phone in awe. This wasn't just a dream anymore, it was real, and it had all started with a single act of kindness. Sometimes the smallest gestures can change someone's life in ways we can't imagine. Keanu Reeves didn't just leave a generous tip, he restored someone's faith in herself. If this story inspired you, share it with someone who needs a little hope today. Would you do the same if you had the chance? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible real-life stories that prove kindness still exists in the world. Because sometimes, one small act can create a ripple that changes everything.